Yeah.
All right, everyone, I will call this meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose peoples have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Leilohan Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, July 22nd, 2024, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. As I always do, for folks that are new joining us either in person or online today, I'd like to introduce the other elected members of our council. Starting on our right, face who we haven't seen for a couple of meetings, who has been away, but we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake, and to his right is Councillor Allison Morse. We are also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, our Corporate Officer Sophie Insignia, as well as other members of our staff who may be presenting reports here this afternoon. Oh, yes, and also online. Apologies, Councillor Jurgensen. We have Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Alex Jurgensen joining us online. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the question and answer or public comments portion of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca or online on our YouTube channel. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens here. I would encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting, and the direct comments for council during the public comment and the question and answer portion of the meeting to my side. The agenda and full council package for this afternoon meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca for folks that are either in the room and want to dig in deeper or online. Just before looking for adoption of the agenda, I think it is notable to mention that today is the last council meeting for our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, who joined us here at the municipality a couple of years ago, has been instrumental in helping to bolster staff culture here. His expertise at the province in infrastructure and project management has lent a lot of wisdom and process to the projects we've had on island. He is leaving us for the town of Sydney. I've sent the town of Sydney a letter saying that we will no longer speak to them in any way, shape, or form. But we do wish him all the best. I did want to thank him for his service in the public realm. As our next meeting in September, we will quite possibly have a new member. So thank you very much, Liam, and thank you for your service to the municipality.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, we will move on to approval of the agenda. I'll look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items this afternoon.
Yes, there were two letters that came in over the weekend. One was 8.1B, a letter from a concern for Blue Water Park residents regarding the Blue Water Park water system replacement. And item 12.13, which is a letter from Bruce Russell regarding beach drive maintenance.
Thank you. And with that, I will look for a motion that approve the agenda and on-table items for the July 2nd, 2024 meeting. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion, changes, amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Next order of business is public comments. I'll look to the corporate officer for public comments here today.
We have two today.
Okay, so each commenter will have the full 3 minutes available to them. When your name is called, feel free, or not feel free, please come on up and grab a seat on the chair here in front of us. Your time it doesn't start until you start speaking. So, get settled, calm any nerves. I know that that can be anxiety provoking sometimes speaking in front of council. And you will hear a buzzer or a beep at 15 seconds before your time is done, just to let you wrap up your thoughts and get any last points in. And with that, I will look to the corporate officer to call the first speaker.
Elizabeth Gauchi.
Thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Mayor Leonard and members of council for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. It's on the agenda item about the property lines at 1461 Eagle Cliff Road. My sister and I are the co-owners of the property. My name is Elizabeth Goetschy. My sister is over there by the window, Margaret Gentile. Our cabin is on the waterfront at Eagle Cliff Beach. Our dad built the cabin in 1939, and I've been coming here for 80 years, so it's a special place to me. Thank you, Daniel Martin, for preparing a report and sending my letter to council. However, we do not agree with some of the information in the report, and we don't agree with the recommendation by the staff. The issue, based on the survey map, is that the cabin appears to encroach on the municipal right-of-way, but no road could be built where the cabin sits. The land is far too steep. We are asking Bowen Island Municipality to adjust the property line so that our cabin can continue to remain where it is. The current covenant with the municipality states that the covenanter shall remove the works from the encroachment area prior to the completion of the sale of the lands or a portion of them, unless prior to the sale, the purchaser of the lands enters into an agreement satisfactory to the municipality. The report from the municipal planners gives the false impression that the cabin prevents people from getting to the beach. This is not true. As long as the cabin has been there, people have always been able to get to Eagle Cliff Beach. Our neighbor nearest Poole, who is sitting with us today, strongly agrees with this assertion. Our cabin existed long before Bowen Island became a municipality. Removal of the cabin would not provide improved access to the beach for anyone. There would be no benefit to the community or the municipality. What would the municipality have gained by forcing us to remove our cabin? The planner stated in his report that many of the properties developed below Eagle Cliff Road did not follow established lines. How have these situations been dealt with? The planner has presented 4 options. The land trade is our preferred option. We ask that council not approve the recommendation by staff to take no further action on the proposed covenant amendment, but instead direct staff to enter into negotiations with the owners of the property for a land exchange for the encroachment. I think that this is doable. And I thank you for your attention today, and I'll be happy, my sister and I'd be happy to answer any questions or meet with you here or on our property.
Thank you.
I think I used my 3 minutes.
That was perfect. That was probably one of the best uses of 3 minutes I've ever seen.
Thank you, everyone.
Next, we have Kathy Fuller.
Councillor Morse.
Elizabeth, prepared notes. Is there any chance that those could be left with the corporate officer if she was reading from something?
Yes, so Councillor Morse is wondering if you had prepared notes, whether you would be willing to leave them with the.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, no problem. So go ahead, Councillor Morse.
You were speaking from prepared notes, so could those be left with the corporate officer?
These are my notes, yeah.
Could you leave those with the corporate officer so we could have them to refer
For
to?
Sonia?
Sophie?
Yeah, Sophie, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Corporate officer, yes.
Yeah, and we can take a copy and give you that back.
I don't think I had anything else. I didn't put my name on it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Easier to read those than my handwriting.
Thank you for joining us here today, Chair Fuller.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time and your interest. Last week at the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we put forward a recommendation that the council approve the mayor to sign a letter that will be in support of an application that is being made to the Public Health Agency of Canada for their dementia community investment. The goals are to optimize health and well-being of people living with dementia and their caregivers and to increase knowledge of dementia and risk of protective factors. So people who have dementia fall into this target group for accessibility. Many of the people with dementia also live with sensory loss, and sensory loss actually is a risk factor and complicates how people's health goes with dementia. So that's another accessibility related issue. So basically, this grant would bring about $1 million for this project. It is going to be submitted by the VP Research of the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. There is a national level, and then there's also a local kind of demonstration model piece, which will bring funds to us to do the things that I think we will co-create. So this is supporting a letter of intent. So the details of the final application, will come in the fall if we're approved. We will use this participatory research method, which means nothing about Bowen Island without Bowen Island. So that is a method that we heard about from the head of gerontology at Simon Fraser last week. So, and it will bring money for us to actually implement accessibility actions in connection with some of the programming that Sky is doing, the programming that could be done at the community center, public information that could be delivered to the library. So I think it's a good idea, and I just mostly want to give you a chance to ask any questions.
So, just so I'm understanding what would be happening, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada is applying for this money. And they will be distributing it to maybe the various provincial Alzheimer's organizations who will then distribute it to locals, or are they going to distribute it directly to communities?
Yeah, so
We're not going to get the whole damn. whole huge grant.
No, but I'm gonna try to get half of it. But what they do at the national level, will feed into what we kind of work with locally. So the four specific work packages are to create an awareness campaign about what is the real truth about the connections between hearing loss and dementia, because the public's very confused about that. To offer information about how to screen your senses. The third piece will be, I think, the most fun, and it will build on what we learned about the Dementiascape inclusive community design projects that have been done with Vancouver that, would be adapted here. And then the fourth piece is to create a resource hub, which would be an online repository of best practices and information. So I think the actual, how do we just do this? Well, that part of the money will come here. So it will cover rental of space. It will cover personnel. It will cover students in gerontology from Simon Fraser who are collecting and analyzing data. So we will get to spend the money.
Well, I'm not sure that you've answered my question. All the grant application is being done by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. And they will receive all the money.
Yep.
And they will decide who gets the money.
We will make a budget. We will make a budget in the fall. And those details will be worked out. And as I say, this is participatory, so you will have a say on that budget. But what I'm imagining is, the Bowen Island piece, there'll be a subcontract. And if it's for so many hours of space at the community center, then, the check will be
So
written.
who's going to look after that?
Well, it's like buying, renting a space,
So the Alzheimer's Society of Canada is going to send money to Bowen Island Municipality, and we're going to have to account to the Alzheimer's Society of Canada where that money's been spent on. Or are they going to
well,
deal with the
I.
distribution directly to
Lynn
various?
Beatty and I think, will be the kind of coordinators of the research here. So the way I'm thinking about it is, if I need to hire a student, I will, the person will be hired and will
By
be
who?
paid from from the pot of money.
So they're not gonna get a T4 split from the Alzheimer's Society of Canada?
No, they would probably get it from Simon Fraser, but Simon Fraser students. And if we want to have, so many hours of space at the community center and there's a rental contract and the invoice for that rental would go to them and the invoice would be paid. So think about it as an invoicing kind of a method, because I know it's minimizing the financial administration was a concern.
Well, that's my concern, is just who's accountable for the money, who's gonna issue.
So if
enforcement and all
if the
that.
municipality can create an invoice, they can be paid.
So they're not writing checks to just you and like,
No. We may send the invoices in, but they're not.
well, it's an excellent sounding project. I'm just worried about what we're getting involved in from an accounting and keeping track of the money and distributing the funds section.
Yeah, we can have that discussion during the
Yeah,
item on the agenda. Councillor Getty.
That was my point in terms of, I think that it's important at this point to support the funding to the larger organization, Alzheimer's of Canada, but then working out all the details, if we are accepted and we get the funding, that we make sure that that's all sorted before we actually accept it. But that's, so I guess put Chair Fuller on notice that there's some work that has to be done in terms of getting that budget together.
Yeah, and I realized that was an obstacle, which is why I was very happy that the Alzheimer's Society wanted to take on all the financial administration.
Councillor Fast for any questions.
I have no questions. Thanks. I'm on the committee and I'll stick with the agenda.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Good,
Thank you, Chair Fuller.
all right, thank you.
Any other public comments today?
No, that's.
So that is the end of our public comments. Moving on to delegation 3.1. The Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing and Tomo Spaces regarding an update on the Lot 1 community lands. Feel free to join us here up at the front. And I believe we have the chair of our Housing Advisory Committee, Robin Fenton, online here as well. We can see you. And if you're ready, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff for making time before summer recess to receive this update, and a special thanks to Liam. I'm Mark Shea from Tomo Spaces. I'm joined today by Robin Fenton, who's online. And this is a 30% check-in on the Lot 1 work that we've been doing. And just as a bit of background, Sophie, may I trouble you to put up the timeline? I'll start with a bit of rewind and how we got here today. So in 2021, Bowen Island Municipality invited expressions of interest to develop Lot 1 Area 2. Birch and Tomo at the time were the two teams that were shortlisted by council and staff. And since then, Robin and her team at Birch and Tomo, we got to know each other. And in 2023, towards the end of that year, we came before council and you all endorsed a work plan proposed for the phased implementation plan for the whole Lot 1, including its 4 sub areas. And one of the focus from that in terms of homework to us was there were many sensible studies over the past two decades, and that we were to focus on bridging this gap, which seems to be around how do you implement, how do you make it happen. So that's where we are. In terms of today, I think initially we wanted to do this at about 25%. We're done a bit more, so we're calling it a 30% check-in. And for the last 6 months, these are the main things that our team has been working on. And I would just stop to also acknowledge our core team members, Emma, Leslie, Nigel, in addition to Robin and myself. And then we've also had a lot of support from consultants who pitched in with their expertise, as well as community members, and a generous grant from the Bowen Island Community Foundation. So thank you all. Mainly today we'll cover sort of a summary of our work to date. So we did a literature review of past reports and plans. There was an online survey, and then we've started to do small group discussions, and then we've even done a first design charrette. So today we'll cover all those, and then the next time we'll see you all is for a more interactive workshop in the fall. The municipality back in 2005 purchased the lot 1 from Metroban Parks. I think at that time, the focus was also around housing. And so our work really is about this question of that lightning bolt, how in the next 5-year-ish, we can build on all the good work that's happened before, and how do we implement, how do we start building non-market housing for Bowen Island. Next slide, Sophie, please. So a bit of context. Some community members have described that as the boomerang lot, so you can see that highlighted. And then next slide, it shows the 4 different sub areas with different designated uses for each of those. And then I'm going to jump right into some of the things that we've read and noticed. There was probably a good over 2 dozens or so reports and studies that's been done over the years. And I'll touch upon that. One thing I've noticed is, yes, housing continues to be a priority, but there's been a nuance in terms of how we've talked about this housing need. So whereas before it was maybe rent versus own, but now, even if you take that tenure types, there's been a lot more nuanced discussions around perhaps it's a co-op model, perhaps it's co-housing, perhaps it's rent to own. And the other thing that we've also noticed is senior housing continues to be an area where the community members have voice where the needs are. So I think from there, I'm going to invite Robin to talk about what we heard from the online survey.
Thanks, Mark. So yeah, next page. Thanks, Sophie. So it seems that we did a check-in survey because we wanted to check in. The last time there was some engagement was back around, I believe, 2018 when the rezoning was happening. So we wanted to do a check-in. We got 55, I believe, responses from the survey. So not a great response, but not an insignificant response. And generally what we found was housing's definitely a top priority. And wanting it to be, let's say, more than single family. So something like attached, higher density than single family, and needing a variety of options. The light industrial was still a priority, though people definitely expressed interest as to what does light industrial mean? Is it going to be noisy, smelly things, or is it more like artisan live work? So, and there was sort of an expressed interest for the latter. Keeping Bowen, keeping it kind of green because it is a lovely forested area. So making sure to keep the greenery intact as while you're thinking about the housing. Community gathering spaces was definitely another one that was brought up in our engagement, and if this project could include some community spaces. And yeah, seniors need and common spaces, low income seniors, spaces dedicated to seniors was something that came through as well. So it does seem to reinforce that here we are 6 years later and the priorities are generally still the same. We aren't terribly off, and we can keep going on this track was the purpose of this engagement round, was just to make sure we're still on track, we're still heading in the right direction. So shifting to maybe next slide. This one is just to show how, kind of where we're heading. So in the fall, we're hoping to have like a workshop, committee of the whole type session with council to kind of dig into a little bit more of the work we've done and some more details. So as an example, something that we would potentially be bringing would be something you're seeing on the screen, which is a spreadsheet that's showing the mix of bedrooms or suites and sizes of bedrooms, rent levels, how many suites there would be, you know, and a sort of financial formula of how much you know, rent that brings in and how much it might cost to build. So those kinds of things. We're just at the very early stages of even starting to map that out, but we're hopeful in a few months when we meet, we'll have something there that can be discussed and addressed. And just to reiterate what Mark said earlier, this is aimed at community housing, non-market housing, whatever words you want to use, but essentially we're aiming at it to be some form of community housing. So not necessarily for-profit rental or for-profit market housing. The next slide. This was a major theme that came up. I did a few one-on-ones with various people, including Patrick Graham from the municipality, sort of just to discuss, you know, what is it that we need to know about the physical pieces of land, and if we are going to create something, what are some limitations, what are some red flags, or what are some assumptions that we need to make sure we include. And infrastructure was this huge thing. So for those watching or those councillors who don't know, you know, when you're developing land, it's really critical to understand the infrastructure that's going into it. So we've got on the left side of this this spreadsheet here, water, waste, stormwater, fire protection, electricity, roads and parking, and then we have an other section for some other notes. I'm not going to read through all of those. We made sure to include this, so anybody wants to later, they can kind of read through the details. But essentially, these are the big things that will need to be sort of addressed and explored in the next phases of the work to make sure we can make the best use of this land, and hopefully economically as well, because of course you can just plop something down anywhere, but it might cost a fortune. So to really think about how the land's being developed, how to work with the land, and how to incorporate all these infrastructure needs into it. And I think, next slide. One of them, of course, is wastewater, so septic. So we all know there is a Snug Cove wastewater system that has limitations at the moment, and there's work sort of happening there. So we are generally working on the assumption this will be an on-site wastewater system. And we know that we're just sort of giving this heads up again. We might have some more detail on this in the workshop coming up in a few months. And I believe this came up in a council meeting a few months ago. There are some limitations in terms of having to go through the process with Vancouver Coastal Health and the sort of type 1 system, which needs a lot of land space, even though you may in fact install a system that's much smaller. And then there are things that the municipality can help with in terms of bylaws and stuff to actually allow for the smaller system approval. So we won't get into those details now, but it's more of just a heads up that, you know, infrastructure, on-site wastewater, all of those things are going to be pretty critical to sort of figure out as to how to move this forward. And as Mark sort of put it, which I love, is how do we get from where we are now to actually building something? So bridging that gap, and infrastructure is going to be one of the really critical pieces to figure out. Next slide. This is, what we sort of have discovered really are going to be some of the, I like this, constraints to opportunity. So what are the things that are going to be important for us to figure out and learn about this, site? So speed to construction, there's some trade-offs between the on-site wastewater system, or if it did work to do a communal one, or potentially in the future hook up to the sewer, there's timelines there to be considered. Economical solutions to pay for the infrastructure, as I kind of touched on, you know, hopefully the lots, well, to be determined how the lot would be, the various lots might be developed, timelines, whether it's phased, whether it's sort of all done at once. Levels of housing affordability to be discussed. As some of you might know, in my recent experience on the Miller Road project, to get really deep affordability requires a lot of patience and applications and working with various levels of governments for those subsidies. And in this case, we might be looking not for that deep affordability, but more kind of low end of market affordability for average working people. That at the moment is sort of where we're heading for, but certainly not exclusively. There's other mixes still on the table. And number 4 is listed as tenure and governance options. So long-term land lease, which seems to be kind of the recommended method these days. And as Mark had mentioned, co-ops, co-housing, rent, rent to own kind of options. All of those are sort of being looked at and discussed at the moment. Next slide. So the next steps are what we're working on now is sort of that implementation plan. So what we aim to have at the end of this year would be having the workshop with council, having some more touch base of engagement, which I plan to do later in the summer at BoFest and the Farmers Market. Understanding, hopefully, fully the technical constraints, having a high level pro forma and some target rents, and having explored those financing options and partnership options to present back. And we sort of graded out, but there's some ideas of, a business plan might be a next step, a pre-development construction, just to kind of give the idea that if this did proceed along, there are further steps to be taken. So next slide. In this, we just added a few of the images of some of the plans and things that have been looked at before. So more just for reference. Some analysis of slopes and walking distances. There's this next plan, which is the Flatiron Junction one that was done a while back. And then another one that was done, I believe, in 2007. So there is, like Mark mentioned, lots of history and lots of great work that's been done. So we're really trying to build on that and move to next steps. I might just pass it back to Mark. Is there anything I missed, Mark?
Oh, it's good.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. I'll look to council for questions, comments. Councillor Morse.
Can I take it that you're focusing on the triangle, area 1 and lot 1, rather than the whole of lot 1?
Yeah, let's go back to the
That was the,
if we can go back to one of the earlier ones. So area 1, yes, has, I would say area 1 and area 2 have the greatest potential for housing. And then some folks have suggested that area 4 potentially should be sold in order to fund some of the other homes.
because I just remember going through quite a process to have the mixed use
Yes.
for area 1.
Mhm.
So that, but nobody's taken up on it at this point, so. Come forward with any proposals to actually do something there, so I don't know how. Yeah. Because that's been rezoned now for 6 years, I guess. 5 or 6 years, and nobody's. None of the commercial people have wanted to.
One of the ideas that we're exploring is looking at the proximity to the Cove as well as with Hicks as well as Artisan, and look at what shop houses, for example, or live work, some sort of commercial activity along the road, and looking at parking. So that's definitely still on the table.
Thank you.
I really appreciate having the slides and any of the preparation before the workshop in the fall.
Yes.
And if we can get a copy of these, 'cause I don't know about where your position is, but the angle that I'm on, they're small print, it's pale, and I can't read it, so it would be very helpful to have that ahead of time.
Yes, of course. Sophie, will you help me distribute those?
Yeah, the slides are in the agenda. These slides. Is that what?
I think they're part of the delegation. There's no attachment.
There's no link or attachment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had done that.
We can send it around for sure.
Yeah,
They would normally get attached, right,
yes.
Yes.
afterwards if we didn't have. It's interesting.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Best?
Yeah, I'm just from the official community plan back in 2011. I guess that would be your kind of 20-year, 25-year window for reports and things. At that time, our current official community plan did have affordable housing, attainable housing, whatever it was called, as one of the dominant community themes.
Yes.
And so I'm really delighted that you're working on this and that council is looking at its resources in a way that can help the community, and that we're going to be looking at it in the fall. That's great. I don't have a question. except mine was the same. Can I see the slides? Yeah.
Torrio.
Oh, and I just wanted to thank you and the others involved in this and your work, and I know it's something that is going to be very beneficial to the community, hopefully in a tangible way sooner than later. But I did want to just ask that doesn't discount the possibility of connecting to the sewer system and don't focus all your energy on site, because the way things seem to be shifting with grant funding programs is that historically it was that any new development wouldn't be eligible for senior level government grant funding. But we're seeing a shift, and that if we're talking about especially non-market driven housing, there may actually be grant funding available for that. And so a project of this magnitude could be a really significant contributor to the possible expansion of our Cove Bay wastewater system. So I just would just ask to not discount the possibility of that.
Appreciate that, Neil. I hope we can still count on calling you from time to time. Yes, yeah, and we'll make sure to have both options still in to explore.
Councilor Wake.
Thank you. This is all very exciting. I'm really hoping we can pull together and work as a team. There's no question we need this housing. And it would be great to have a little diversity in terms of some live work and some light industrial, which we also need. So I just look forward to next steps, and I hope we can move it forward so it doesn't take us 5 years to get it done.
Thank you, Councilor Wake. Back to you, Councilor Morris.
Just remembering when the comment was made about the sewer. We used to have an infrastructure committee many years ago, and it was made, there were several engineers on the committee. And I recall them doing a report about lot 1 and the sewer connections and things like that. So maybe in their old minute, which is on our website. Yeah, I'll have it. If you can't find it, I'll have a quick look when I remember.
Thanks, Councilor.
Seeing no further questions or comments, thank you, both Mark and for Robin for showing up today, as well as other members of your team. It's appreciated and looks like exciting work, so thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Moving on to the consent agenda, I will turn your attention to the items on there and ask council and councillors if there are any items that you'd like to see removed from the consent agenda. Councillor Saunders.
12.4 and 12.12.
12.4 and 12.12. Councillor Getty.
12.7.
Councillor Morris.
About 4.8.
Last call for items for the consent agenda. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hands. Aye. Aye. That carries unanimously, and we will handle the items pulled from the consent agenda in numerical order, starting on 4.8. The award of contract for paving Govan Island Recycling Depot. Over to you, Councillor Morris, for distribution.
No problem with. I have no problem with, the idea of repaving the recycling depot, but I'm not exactly sure. It sounds like you're taking the money from what I would have called the road rehabilitation budget. And to me, paving a parking lot inside the recycling depot has nothing to do with, it's not a road. It's not a parking lot, it's an operational area, so I'm curious as to why that money isn't coming out of the solid waste budget.
Well, it's coming out of the capital renewal and replacement budget, which is used for roads as well as culverts for the most part. But I mean, last year we paved the library parking lot with that source of funds. That's not a road either. As well as the entryway into the bird. The solid waste budget is an operational budget. And the parcel tax essentially pays for the ongoing operation of solid waste services. So it seems like it is.
If the
it
bird
is-
wasn't operating there, we wouldn't need to repay you wouldn't want to pay the parking, the work area. It's not a parking lot, it's a work area. I mean, a parking lot in the library is different. But you said capital renewal and replacement fund. This is renewal and it's not replacement. It's something new.
It's not new, it's renewable.
Was it paid before?
It's not paved before, no, but the existing surface is, we're not expanding the area, we're just upgrading the surface. So that it's,
I understood from your report, it was coming from the road rehabilitation budget.
well,
Not the
it's-
capital
we,
replacement.
we budgeted 500,000 from that capital renewal and replacement reserve. We budgeted 500,000 for road rehabilitation projects. If those projects are coming in over 100,000 less than that, which leaves enough money from that fund, from that budgeted amount to go with the bird site.
Even the state of many of the roads on the island, I would say that spending 100,000 on roads on the island would be a better thing to do than paving it out of the budget that relates to the operations of the solid waste function. So I'm quite happy for you to pave it because it's a safe way, but I don't like the source of funds. So I'm dilemma as to how to vote.
Any other questions, comments on this piece? Councillor Fast?
I'm in favor of this recommendation, partly because, like the library parking lot, it's a place that's used by the community. We want to encourage the use of our public facilities. We want to encourage recycling and the knick-knack nook and all those things. And sometimes it can get crowded in there, and I think the area is getting kind of wider as people are. Anyway, maybe the paving will help to contain the impact on the area, and it might make operations for everybody smoother, easier to keep clean the snow. I remember from the library, but if there's any anyway, I'm in favor. It sounds to me, I don't think it always needs to be roads. You also need to have something at the end of the road. It makes sense to me, and the capital renewal and replacement, it sounds like improvements. And fixing up the existing. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Councillor Fast, Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Morris for follow.
So Director Graham, your report says it's the portion of the bird site behind the public drop-off that's unpaved and causes significant problems. So it's not a change or an improvement with respect, and it's already paved, with respect to where I drive in and park my car and unload, and that's all paved already, and around the knick-knack nook and all, that's not gonna change. It's all in the back where.
Oh,
Yeah, okay, so there's lots of potholes and puddles and mud and all the rest of it during the wet season, and dust and potholes in the summer.
Right, so it does impact the staff.
Yeah, so it's fixing up all of that area so that that doesn't degrade anymore. And they can move around and load and unload.
Right.
Councillor Morris?
That was my question.
Okay.
Anything the public accesses, it's in behind the fence.
So perhaps Councillor Morris to
I'm not making a motion.
that's what I'm saying is to relieve you, to allow you to vote the way that you would like to vote, depending on the discussion or debate. I'll look for another councillor to move the recommendation. Councillor Fast?
in spite of my confusion, I'm still in favor. I'd like to move that council award the contract for paving the back portion of Bowen Island Recycling Depot to Monarch Paving for an amount not to exceed 93,500 excluding GST.
Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. All opposed,
Hey.
raise your hand, say nay.
I'm opposed because of where the funds are coming from.
So the motion carries with Councillor Morse in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Next item, pulled 12.4 for Councillor Saunders. I'm presuming that 12.4 and 12.12 go hand in hand.
No, they don't actually.
Okay, so we'll 12.4 over to you, which is Brenton Nielsen regarding the fair.
Right, so I think, thank you. I think we're all familiar with the numerous letters that Mr. Nielsen has taken the time to send to pretty much everybody in the province, and kudos to him for that. What's happened since then is I took it upon myself, not as a member of council, just as a citizen, to follow up on one of his a week or two ago, because they were kind of bothering me, and I sent a letter, an email to everybody saying, you know, you guys could at least take the time to respond to Mr. Nielsen. And they did. So I got a response about 3 hours ago, actually, from the MLA. And so this is just updates for everybody from our MLA, Mr. Surtees' office. And they said, you know, we appreciate that you didn't get a response, or that Mr. Nielsen didn't get a response. We did send a letter to BC Ferries last summer. They haven't responded to us. Therefore, we didn't respond, but now they've responded like yesterday, and here's what they did. So in fact, there was a letter, and I can eventually forward it, or although it's probably in all the, in everybody's email at some point. There was a letter from BC Ferries that got sent by Mr. Surtees' office that said, you know, people on Bowen are getting a little choked about this. And the response from BC Ferries was a non-response. It outlined all their excuses and said, not our problem. So anyway, I'm just updating that in fact, somebody has responded to Mr. Nielsen now. And I followed that up with, you know, it'd be really good if they could at least offer a solution, you know, because I've got some, you know, better marshalling would be a good one. In any event, we do have at least our MLA's office on the job on this, even if BC Ferries is still, in my mind, pretty unresponsive to everything. So just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you for your work on that, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Wake.
That's interesting. I wanted to point out the one letter that came from Mr. Nielsen that was actually positive, and just that was just this past week, and indicated that whatever day it was, maybe Friday, that all the ferries were on time. And asked the question, I think he asked the question, I certainly asked the question afterwards. Well, okay, what happened that day? What's different? What are you doing differently? Because it was a Friday, that's a busy day. So before that, on Wednesday, I've had a couple of exchanges with Tamara Olson, who is the public relations coordinator for BC Ferries and the various communities. I had asked a couple of questions following up on the session, the engagement session they had in the library. And questions like, how do we possibly get the Community Capilano to be on schedule most of the time? Because it's not on schedule most of the time. And I also asked a possible water taxi arrangement for when we had, especially from this side, overloads of passengers that were limiting the number of cars that could go on the ferry. We had a wide-ranging conversation. She was very responsive and explained the whole relationship of how it works between the Ferry Advisory Committee. She's often in contact with Howard Davenport, who's the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and also our representative on the Ferry Advisory Committee. And she's gonna get back to me on a number of things, but it was encouraging in the sense that it sounds like there is understanding, at least amongst some of the staff there, and she's in a key position on this, that there needs to be a dialogue. It can't be everybody in all these communities complaining and then getting these generic answers back from BC Ferries. We need to have, and we talked to the marshal, and that was on Wednesday. And remarkably, when I came back on Wednesday afternoon, the marshal had improved. And same on Thursday, when a couple of family members came over. So just a little bit of optimism for, let's just keep working on this.
So when you say marshalling had improved, do you mean on the?
Question based on that. So just the schmozzle when there's nobody there and people people block the far lanes because they're trying to get into closing lanes.
My takeaway from I've sat in on 2 recent engagement events for BC Ferries. One I think was for elected officials in the area, and the other was the one that was held at the library that I think Councillor Morse was at as well. And I'm encouraged that they're listening and taking in ideas. The part that makes me a little bit wary, and I think not wary, but it's also fair from the BC Ferry standpoint, is that I think their messaging going out seems relatively clear, that they are also hamstrung through their funding from the province, as well as the fares that are being set by the BC Ferries Commissioner. The encouragement that I've had to community members that I've been talking to about this in recent days and weeks has been, I think we do well as a community in sending letters and making phone calls to BC Ferries, but I've been encouraging people to widen that advocacy to both our MLAs, as Councillor Saunders did, also the Minister of Transportation, particularly given that we're about to go into a provincial election season. So ferries are the responsibility of the province. They're not the responsibility of the municipality, and residents should by all means be writing their MLA as well as the minister on these issues, as well as the BC Ferries Commissioner. So if it's a funding issue and BC Ferries is making the claim that they can't fund any of these changes without commensurate pulling back of service or administration in some other area, then there is a funding challenge that needs to be solved, and that can only be solved through the BC Ferries Commissioner as well as the province. So I would expect to see some advocacy for that. The community should be aware that we do have the Union of BC Municipalities Conference that's coming up in the fall. We've requested meetings with the Minister of Transportation. We will continue to press the minister as well as his staff, as well as the MLA about changes to ferry policy. That also, I was recently discussing with our CAO the possibility of adding an item there, given some of the feedback that we got from the engagement event that said that BC Ferries had indicated that assured loading for residents is a policy change that needs to be done at the ministerial level. So that's something that we will be pressing staff on as well. But it's, I think Ferries is listening, but we can't let up on the advocacy and engagement to them. It needs to be in their face constantly. I think if we're going to see changes to service on the island. Councilor Morse.
I can't see how running on time has anything to do with funding of the system, unless you're implying that they've said they need more staff in the terminal, in which case they might need more funding. But I don't see how funding is anything to do with making it run on time.
Well, that would be a broader conversation. I think funding for some of the infrastructure here in South Bow to deal with dispersion issues of pedestrians that come off, the ability to do double lane loading on this side. I think there's infrastructure pieces here that could certainly be solved with money. And then the rest of the system as well. Because we also know that Buddy and Langdale don't run on time, and then it has knock-on effects on both of them as well.
I guess going back to what Councillor Saunders said, or maybe Councillor Lee, I can't remember, analyzing okay, everything was on time on Friday, so what was different between Friday? Is it the times? Is it the number of commercial? What is? You know, there's consistently one morning run that seems to get off track. And I was not impressed with the engagement session at the library. I mean, it was entirely operational issues that were being discussed, and there wasn't anybody there that knew the answers. And no, the staff didn't know that not all the votes fit in all the berths at all the times. You know, and that's one of the problems.
And I would agree. I think it's telling when you have engagement events where only communications and engagement staff show up too, and you don't have any technical staff on hand as well. And in terms of what went right, I mean, the generally more pessimistic about things, I think, when it comes to governance, and there's the, quote about broken clocks being right twice a day. That comes to mind. So until we see any consistent and sustained service improvement and adherence to schedule, I'm cautious. So with that, I think we spent enough time on this. Perhaps Councillor Saunders, if I can get you to get a motion to receive the correspondence in 12.4. Okay, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. And then we are over to item 12.7, Chair Joy McIlphail regarding BC Ferries Board of Directors regarding the response to Mayor Silas White. Over to you, Councillor Getty.
Okay, so it's the same issue, BC Ferries, and we followed up the letter from the Mayor Silas White, and basically repeated the same comments and sent that off. And we've received, I think because he had CC'd us, that we've received a copy of this letter from Joy McPhail. So she's the chair of the Board of Directors, which is one of the three entities that controls BC Ferries. They're convoluted structure. So it's interesting the kinds of things that she has said in this letter. And unlike Councillor Wake and yourself, Mayor Leonard, the mere twinkles of hope in some of this. And I think that this and the letters from Brent Nielsen and the other one with respect to the 12.12, they all fit together in terms of there's a huge problem that it might be good for us to figure out some sort of a workshop. And when the federal representative was here, he kind of twigged to the idea of having a regional conference in terms of all the communities that are linked by water and rail and road and all the different ways that we're sort of underserviced. So I go back to that in terms of it would be good to focus and get some ideas, because the BC Ferries is just listening. That's not good enough. And if they're constrained, then we, maybe they need help from the feds, and maybe we can, help them prioritize. But I think that it's there's all these little drops that are could add up to something that is more serious that they will listen to. But it's interesting that this other mayor got a letter from Joy McPhail. That's hasn't happened very often. So I think that it'd be very interesting if we get a response to our follow-up letter. So then I will move receipt for information of 12.7 unless there's more discussion.
Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And on to 12.12, Catherine Robertson regarding huge white tour bus dated July 18th, 2024. And Steph Bogan regarding tour buses dated July 18th, 2024. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm referring specifically to the letter from Catherine Robertson, which identified a problem which a lot of people became aware of suddenly. My only concern with that is and you've tried to answer this on several occasions in the past, and I think reiterating it once more won't hurt, is in that letter it said, did you people authorize this, meaning authorize it huge tour bus getting freebie loading kind of thing. The point being that, no, but it's not our place to authorize any, this is not within our control, and people need to understand that we're doing what we can. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there so that people aren't going, I can't believe you guys, allowed this tour bus to park in the crosshatch and to bump up, that kind of thing.
Councilor Morse, followed by.
It's a bit about the parking in the crosshatch. I don't think they were right down
I
at the
agree.
bottom, then they were blocking the fire hydrant, which is
Yeah,
so they could have been ticketed by the RCMP. And the crosshatching means no parking without a permit. And the only permitted place to park there is the Life Lab spot and the medical assured loading that's up by the general store.
Mhm.
So I guess we do have some sort of, because we're the ones that put the crosshatching there and we're the ones that say no parking there. And if they were parked in front of a fire hydrant, then they should have got the ticket.
I think that's true, sorry, I think that's true. My concern is that, did you people authorize the bus getting reservations? What I was referring specifically to.
Yeah, and to that, I did follow up with staff on that almost immediately, and unequivocally, the answer is no, we have not been authorizing the buses to park on the island. I think what was unusual about this one, which seems unique, I spoke to our bylaw officer this morning briefly about it. Seems copied on the email as well, is that it's the news that BC Ferries is issuing reservations for buses of 10 or more coming off the Bowen Island side was news to him. My response, Ms. Robertson, was that BC Ferries can load their boat however they want. I mean, it's the BC Ferries boat, and they can put people on it or take people off it. But in terms of reservation, immediately as you get off of that ferry loading zone, that's all municipal roadway. So BC Ferries doesn't have control over that roadway. And right now, I don't see any way to marshal a priority loading for buses anywhere in the cove without a reconfiguration of that cove space, or without BC Ferries contributing more money to logistics and the ability to manage some of those reservations in the cove. So I know that Mr. Woods is following up with BC Ferries to get some clarity as to how that came to pass and what their policy is. I think it does put a tour company in a tight spot. They're just trying to navigate the rules and regulations, and they're probably new to the island and don't have much of an idea of how it works. So we'll hear something back. I see our CFO with her hand up.
We did do some research on the website, and the website does provide for reservations to be made on the Horseshoe Bay side for vehicles of carrying 10 or more.
Yep.
It clearly and explicitly says that there are no reservations available from the Snub Cove side. I suspect there's a possibility that either the tour company perhaps was misinformed, perhaps thought they had a reservation on this side. I think the next time it happens, we will make sure to send our bylaw staff down there to investigate and look very closely at this reservation and determine exactly what it is. I suspect that it is not a legitimate reservation, that they did have a legitimate one from the Horseshoe Bay side.
Right. Yes.
I just wanted to say, I remember a couple of these incidents over the past 30 years. The bus comes, the bus wants to go to all these cool places. The bus ends up backing up out of little cul-de-sacs, and because it can't turn around, the bus never comes back. That's what I remember, and this is partly why during official community plan discussions over the years, the idea of a ring road comes up to be debated, and a route around the island. And the vision of cars and big buses and people coming to drive around Bowen makes everybody say, no, we don't want a ring road. So we've got some road infrastructure design currently preventing big buses, and I think we should keep that in mind when we're thinking about changes to roads, is what traffic might we attract that we don't attract now. So just, that's the longer term view, but I agree with the, why was it parked on, why did they think they had a reservation anyway? It's very interesting, but I suspect we won't see them again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wake.
So my question was the same, how, and I think that the answer, but that's what I presumed as well, is it was a reservation for that side, not for this side. But I do think it's a bit rich that the BC Ferries is saying, you know, that they're telling us that they can't do anything about ferry marshals. I guess they're funding part of our ferry marshals. Busy times over here, but their staff cannot go on, apparently, on our road, so it's completely up to us. And then, yet, here comes somebody that thinks that BC Ferries is allowed to do this, so I think we really need to clear that up. And to Council Fast's point, but I question if big tour buses should be allowed to come here. Like, we don't have very many turnarounds. It's problematic. And I think, others saw that bus go up Village Drive and not be able to make the corner and have to back down Village Drive. So, yeah, I think, we're talking about a safety issue. And so I hope we can get to the bottom of this and make some changes.
I'm going to go in the speaking order. So we have Councilor Feddy first, but just as a piece of follow-up, I did speak to the resident about the reservation. Apparently, there was about a half dozen people down there speaking to the tour driver, and they requested to see the actual reservation, and they said that, oh, this actually, it looks like a valid document from BC Ferries from Stud Cove to Horseshoe Bay, which I think is, they didn't get a photograph. I asked, did you get a photograph of it? Did you get the name of the tour company? They didn't, so I think there's some follow-up. I'm hoping that it was just a misunderstanding and an error, but I'm also certainly hoping that BC Ferries isn't issuing reservations from Stud Cove. Councilor Getty.
Well, I think that if there's a written policy that's on their website that it's clearly not a reservation possible from Bowen Island side, that they have, if I would assume BC Ferries is making a more than a standard car space in terms of the money that they get for a bus coming on. So then, as that profit, they would have the responsibility for making sure that the bus tour company is properly advised that there are no reservations on this side, and they should be advertising that nice and loud, and certainly not engaging in that kind of behavior. But it would be, we had tourists coming through the Davies Orchard one time with a big bus, and they expected us to give free tours to the people that unloaded from the bus, and it was just sort of, they were charging each individual tourist $100 for a day trip to Bowen, and they weren't prepared to pay the Heritage Group any amount of money. So we renegotiated that in terms of having the summer student help them, but there's a profit motive, and they shouldn't be taking advantage of our naivete or lack of structure or anything else. We'll just figure it out.
Councilor Morse.
So I was thinking for the resolution, because staff has already been talking to BC Ferries, and so that the public knows that we're following up with BC Ferries, that the resolution should be to receive the information as referred to the bylaw officer. And that way, the public will know if they're looking at our minutes that we're following up with, refer to the bylaw officer for follow-up with BC Ferries.
Sure. So motion to receive and to refer to
BC bylaw department for follow-up with BC Ferries.
BC Ferries, moved by Councilor Morse, seconded by Councilor Wake. Any further discussion? See, now this has felt like some good midsummer group therapy about our situation. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Carries unanimously, and I'm sure we'll have a stack more of issues by the time September rolls around to debrief on our ferries as well.
The interesting point, when I turned up to come to Municipal Hall, the Cisco truck was parked in the middle of the road.
Oh, yeah.
Through lane. That maybe he couldn't make the corner, or it was a new driver or something, I don't know. I saw him walking up.
A new driver, too big a truck, and
Yeah.
Doug was out there helping him.
Hey, moving on, getting back on track here, we've got 7.1 under bylaw amendments for short-term rental. We did discuss this at our committee of the whole, so I'll look to council to get the recommendation on the table, please, and discuss and debate. Councillor Getty.
Recommendation is printed in the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any further discussion on this item? Councillor Morse.
I apologize to everybody for not catching this the first time, but nobody else has either. If you look at the bylaws, I think there's a few things that need to be fixed. Like the second whereas in bylaw 658, we're not amending this to include provisions for the regulation of residential guest accommodation. And if the two whereases on bylaw 659 are the same, and bylaw 660 needs some more definitions added, because the bylaws are referring to property host principle, and so I think we need to have a definition of property host and the other person. There's two definitions missing. I found them the other day when I was reading this. I can't. So I did advise Planner Martin, but he's been away. So can we amend this after first reading? Fix all these things? Problem that way? That's my question.
Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.1, award of tender for waterworks and culvert replacements. We have our Director of Engineering, Patrick Graham, joining us here today.
We have some extensive discussion about this item at the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure, which minutes are matched, I believe. So we've got three major projects, major utility projects that we've combined into a single tender with the intent of generating more interest in the market and obtaining better bids, hopefully. The first one is the upgrading the Bowen Bay wells and interconnecting those wells with Kangaroo Bay and Blue Water systems. That's to solve the supply gap, the gap between available supply and demand in Blue Water. The next one is replacement of a large portion of the water mains in Blue Water Park, as well as replacement of 13 culverts that are overlapping with those water mains. And the third project is connecting the Eagle Cliff and Cold Bay water systems.
Going back.
Eagle Cliff.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah, Eagle Cliff and Cold Bay water systems. And that's essentially to resolve water quality and water quantity issues in Eagle Cliff. And there's a number of culverts associated with that project as well. So the first two of those projects, the Bowen Bay well and system interconnections, as well as the Blue Water Park water mains, are funded through debt that was taken on by the Blue Water Park local service area and is being repaid by a parcel tax on Blue Water properties. the culvert portion of the project is paid by municipal funds. That's related to general road rehabilitation work. The Eagle Cliff project is 73% of it is funded by a grant that we received from the Invest in Canada Infrastructure Program. And the remaining 27% is funded by debt that's assumed by the Eagle Cliff property owners. Similarly, culverts are paid for by municipal funds and not by the service area. There's also a number of properties in between Cove Bay and the Eagle Cliff water systems that may be joining that combined system that would be paying for some of the costs related to this project as well. So we had the tender open for close to 2 months, and we had it extended in the hopes of accommodating some bidders and getting better pricing. That was our main objective. We did receive 5 bids in response to the invitation to tender. The low bidder, NB Contracting Limited, they were substantially lower than the other 4, and also lower than the consultant's pre-tender cost estimates. So that is a concern that we thought about and discussed. We followed up on NB. They're based in Gibsons. They have successfully completed similar projects, and their references are generally positive, that the work that they do tends to be good. The Urban Systems, who are our design consultants, and we're also hiring them for contract administration services on these projects, have worked with NB as well, and with mostly positive experiences. Of course, there always is a risk when you have substantially lower bid. Have they left out any items? Are there substantial change orders to be expected as a result? We have discussed with them a couple of times and reviewed their submission with them. They are confident in what they've submitted. They did confirm they bid it aggressively, but they're confident in their pricing and being able to do the job for price they submitted. Of course, we will need to ensure that we're undertaking rigorous contract administration and project management, and also carrying suitable contingency. Those are essentially the main risk management approaches that we'll be taking. We do recommend awarding the contract to NB. It is a complete and qualified bid. There's nothing wrong with it. Some of the prices are significantly lower than some of the other bids, but they're not, you wouldn't consider it impossible to do these items at those prices. It's something that we're comfortable with. Even with the other bids, they would be substantially higher than what we have budgeted. And as we'll discuss in a minute, even with the NB bid for the Blue Water projects, we are above budget and looking to close that gap. For the Eagle Cliff component of the bid for the Eagle Cliff project is well within budget, so we're not concerned about the finances on that project. So attached to the staff report are 2 spreadsheets that lay out the financial details of, first of all, the 2 Blue Water projects funded by the Blue Water debt, and then the second spreadsheet is the Eagle Cliff project. So we've got, because we're over budget on the Blue Water projects, there's a couple of elements that we could defer. And by defer, it's still work that would need to be done, but it could be either done by staff or deferred to a later date. So one of them is there's an older 2-inch water line along Captain's Way and a larger, a newer 6-inch line. When the newer line was installed, a lot of those service connections were not switched over from the 2-inch to the 6-inch. Part of the objective of this whole project is to decommission the older lines that are more prone to leakage and make the system more secure and solid. So we do want to decommission that line. It is an item that we could defer and have staff over time, possibly accelerated, switch those connections over, which they have done for a number of them already in the past. The other item that we can defer is upgrading the connection between Bowen Bay and King Edward Bay. We believe the existing connection will be adequate for domestic use. Certainly, if there's a desire for fire flow in the future in Bowen Bay, that connection will have to be upgraded. So with deferral of these items, we're still looking at about $400,000 of additional funds needed to complete the project. That's allowing for a 10% contingency. And what we're proposing is that a small amount of that would be covered by Blue Water Park reserves. They have some reserves, although not a huge amount. And then about $350,000 of that would be covered by the Growing Communities Grant Fund, which staff have confirmed there is availability of that much grant funding that we could put towards this project. And it could be repaid as an internal loan, similar to what was done with the wastewater treatment plant. So that's for the Blue Water portion. For the Eagle Cliff portion of the project, there's two parts of that project that relate to the properties connecting, the properties in between Cove Bay and Eagle Cliff that would be paid for by those properties. And so the way it's laid out in the report, it suggested that we would hold back from awarding those components until such time as we receive the funds. One of them, so that's the service connections for the 50 properties in between. And then the other is an extension of the water main down Creek Road to serve a couple of properties along the way, but mainly a property that the owner is planning to subdivide. And so they've agreed to pay for that entire amount. With our recent discussions with NB and Urban Systems, it became apparent that because that item wasn't explicitly listed in the tender as an optional work item, we do have to award that item. Certainly, we wouldn't proceed with any work on it and pay out any amount related to that item until we have payment in full from the property owner. But it does mean we do have to adjust the amount in the recommendation. So the amount that we'd be looking to award the contract for NB would be $5,528,625.01. So that would replace the number that's in the recommendation. So apologies for that, but that's it's not changing anything in the way that the project would proceed. It's just based on the law of contracts and tenders. And I think that's so. I mean, we have a qualified contractor here that can do the work for close to what we've got budgeted. We do need some additional funds, and the Growing Communities Grant Fund seems to be available able to cover that gap. So that's where we stand with these three projects. If there's questions or comments, we can deal with those now.
Councilor Morse.
There was a letter from Trevor Hodge and group that was sent to us last night. And he's talking about, he's asking a couple of questions. So the fire, one of them is he's wanting the 122,000 deferral to be done. And so that he talks about including fire flow as the reason for doing it. So are the hydrants connected to the new line or the old 2-inch line?
No, the hydrants are connected to the new line.
So fire flow provisions will be the same for everybody on Captain's Way, whether you do the inter-house connections or not.
Yeah, it's just that you're not able to decommission that old line until service connections are switched over.
And then the other is, he's asking, he also is assuming that we haven't included GST, but GST is not something we have to pay, so that's, he's asking about the well upgrade and why it's not included in the project cost.
It is included in the project cost.
So where is it?
If you look at attachment 1,
Yeah,
the top portion of that spreadsheet is the water main project. The bottom portion of that spreadsheet is the well upgrade project. And those are all combined in the totals.
okay, so he's just not reading the title, I guess, when he's asking. Or is he asking,
No, it's in the title too. It's
yeah.
the water park, water main and well
Yeah,
upgrade project.
Well, I didn't see a specific well upgrade in the detail underneath that, but that's, so I guess maybe that's what's raising the question. Attachment 1 does not show any costs and funding that are assigned to Bowen Bay for the well upgrade portion of the project. Hence, the total project costs and funding requirements for the entire project appear to be understated. So looking for clarification and correction of this discrepancy. So there's
Yeah,
nothing,
There should be a $40,000 item that's a component of the well upgrade project that's attributable to Bowen Bay.
So is that $40,000 included in the spreadsheet or has it been left off the spreadsheet?
It's included, so it would actually reduce Blue Water Park's contribution.
So it actually bring down the deficit to closer to 350,000.
so that 391,598 should have a Bowen Bay funded column and have $40,000 attributed to that. I guess the question is the 40 in there or not? I mean, if the 40 isn't in there.
No, it's not included in the spreadsheet, so we do need to account for that.
The contribution is not included in the spreadsheet, but the total project cost is included in the spreadsheet.
So the $40,000 that's going to be attributed to Bowen Bay is in the spreadsheet.
It is.
Yeah, it's in the total.
These total project costs line up 100% with the bid amounts.
All right, I just wanted to clarify that we received just the questions were asked last night, so I thought we should make sure they were answered. Thank you. Oh, and one more question. How many empty lots are there in Blue Water?
There's 6 undeveloped lots, full undeveloped lots.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Getty.
So, one of the questions that I asked the CFO, the task force on infrastructure was whether or not, what the work was on the policy with respect to community funding being used for local service area projects. And we don't have that policy set up yet. So the ask at the end of the most recent letter is that we consider giving this project a grant as opposed to an interest-free loan. I think from my perspective, unless and until we get that policy sorted out, I think that we're setting ourselves up for more problems. We haven't sorted that out with respect to the ombudsman report, and I think it's something that we need to prioritize, and, that's on a huge, long work schedule, so I think that it's unfortunate, but, the money's available, but I don't know that we should be, I have the same sort of issue with respect to, the deferral, when you say that staff will just pick it up at some point, along the way, then that becomes, a wider community expense as opposed to a local service.
Sorry, as staff, work done on a blue water system can be charged to local service.
And that'll get picked up in their operating budget as you go along.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that's just come up in your explanation is that the Creek Road, funded private, it's about 83,000. That the developer, there is a developer who is hoping to subdivide, and so that person is willing to pay for all of those expenses. Do we know anything about that subdivision? And has that ever been discussed in terms, I mean, that's setting him up for an expectation, him or her.
The subdivision is in progress. It's one lot being split into two. It's not a big subdivision. But it is with the planning department. I'm not sure what stage it's at, but I believe access,
It's come to council.
they don't,
Subdivision.
they don't.
Yeah.
Subdivisions don't go to council.
Oh,
Rezonings do.
Subdivisions
all
are.
right.
Subdivisions are managed at a staff level for properties that have the ability to be subdivided. If they want to be rezoned to increase the number of lots that could be considered, that comes to council.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Morris?
So a follow-up on that, how are we absolutely certain that we will get that 94,000 from the developer? And what happens if they decide to abandon the subdivision? Can we put a charge on the property for that money?
Well, that's why we wouldn't proceed with that part of the project until we have the money.
But if they have to award it as part of the tender, so are they gonna then want the 96 if we just abandon it?
They're not entitled to payment on an item that they don't proceed with. So whether it's included as part of the award, if it's not executed, it doesn't get paid.
And from a timing perspective, the Eagle Cliff one is gonna happen afterwards, so
It is.
not concurrently, so there's no issue with them redeploying assets or something that they could charge extra for.
No, they've indicated they intend to do it eventually.
I don't have any questions, but I'd be happy to make the motion.
I've got some questions. So I think my questions around the deferral, the Captain's Way piece, were answered, but just to confirm, the Captain's Way run has two pipes right now, like there's a newer pipe and an older pipe. If I understood the explanation correctly, and all of the fire flow is currently on the newer pipe. So properties being on the older pipe doesn't impact fire flow currently.
I understood.
Right, okay. Is there a sense that if staff does this work sort of piecemeal moving forward, or if there's a contract that's awarded, would that be expected to come in at a significantly larger number than the 122,000 that's being deferred right now, given cost escalations or not doing it in a sort of bulk way?
I think if it's done by staff, then the costs would be kept fairly low.
Okay.
If we were to take this piece and tender it at a later date, I would expect the cost to be higher.
Okay. And then I believe that there's been, some members of the community are saying that there's been 200,000 approximately in monies that have been spent on this project already in terms of, consulting fees, the urban systems things. Is that captured in here already, or those are the consulting fees that we're seeing to Blue Water for 304, about 350,000? Are those in addition to the money that's already been spent?
No, they're included. We have a allowance there for 450 in total of consulting fees. And part of those 200,000 expenditures to date has been on design. That 200,000 includes additional soft costs, surveying and painting of the lines on the road, that sort of thing. So in total, the expenditure was 200. So that 450,000 does include the allowance for what's been spent plus additional going forward.
Okay, great, thank you. And then based on some of the references we got back, and in hearing that we may want to exercise, some robust project management on the project with the contractor. Do you have a sense of like the timeline for inspections? Like, I believe would it be Urban Systems that are doing the inspections on the work as it unfolds, or is that?
It would be a combination of Urban Systems and our own staff.
Okay.
So certainly Urban Systems would be designated as the primary contract administrator, and they're the engineers of record.
Okay.
So they're certainly required and expected to do a certain level of inspection. We can increase the efficiency and of the oversight by taking on a role of day-to-day inspection with our own staff.
Okay.
So we would be doing that.
Right, so it is something that once ground is broken, that we could have some really regular eyes on the ground to see
Yes.
what's happening, what's going on.
We would want regular eyes on the ground.
And then in regards to, I do have some questions about the use of the Growing Community Funds monies, because I've had some of this, the same thoughts around the table that Councillor Getty has, and I spoke to some community folks about it. I spoke to some folks that were involved in the original ombudsperson complaint about it over the weekend. And because the part that sort of tweaks for me a little bit is what's different about using Growing Community Funds money for this project is that we've gotten a grant. So we've gotten free-ish money from the province. And now what we're going to do with it is we're going to take money that we got as a grant, and then we're going to loan it out to the community. Right? If it wasn't part of an LSA, we would have the ability just to give it to the project. Whereas, what's I think a little bit different previously is that it was property taxes that were being levied, and then those property taxes were being assigned to the project from residents. And I would have, so I do have, a bit of a concern about taking grant money from the province and then lending grant money out to a local project. When we know that infrastructure is a major issue and a major concern here. We know that the province is moving towards some of these calculations where, hey, we're going to give you a lump sum based on your population. It's relatively unrestricted, as we saw with Growing Communities Fund, as we saw with COVID Restart, and not being able to apply grant funding to sewer or water issues across the island, and needing to loan that money out to residents in those service areas seems a little off to me. So, I think if the province is giving us this money as a grant, then there's no reason why we can't apply these monies as grants to local service areas. And that would be, and I understand that we don't have policy, but I don't even think the direction that we gave to make policy for using general funds contemplated the notion of applying grant money that we get from senior levels of government to infrastructure projects on the island that might be within a local service area. And I don't know how we make that decision, or whether it's a decision for council, given that we're just saying that there's Growing Community Funds money going into here. Do we want to apply that as a grant, or are we going to make the decision that it's That it is a loan, like what are the terms of that loan and, you know, is that something that we want to do? So Councillor Fast, followed by Councillor Morse.
Thanks. I would be concerned about the precedent of giving community money to one set of Bowen Islanders, but not to other Bowen Islanders. And I understand there's differences in the way people have been, service areas have been putting away money in reserve funds for projects like this, and it makes me wonder, would that be, if we gave one service area community money that we could spend on other things that would benefit the whole community, would that chill other local service areas who have been putting money away in reserve funds and might be wondering, well, why should we? Because the municipality will bail us out or whatever. Maybe that's being rough. I just want to have the feeling of fairness and all parts of the everybody being treated equally. And I have in mind the warnings that Vancouver Coastal Health gave us in terms of the climate changing, and that this provision of drinking water is like a core service. And so much work has gone into projects like this over the years, so much balancing and consideration of where could the funds come from. Personally, I like the idea that the funds should be spent on this good project, but they should be repaid by the people who benefit, rather than, because while those funds are being used for that, they can't be used for other community needs. And but we wouldn't even be charging interest. We'd be, I gather, I guess that's an open question too. But I think this is an important project, and the work that has been building up to this point, it should all go ahead with this bid, this tender that we've got, this work that staff have done, and all the community members who've been looking at it and could, anyway, I'm prepared to make the motion, but I wonder whether we should make another motion first about whether that 350,000 or whatever the number is should be repaid. What would be that number?
It is contemplated 350,000.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure I had it correctly. So I wonder if we might contemplate a motion about providing clarity to staff about what council thinks about whether the money should be repaid. And do you like, can I make that motion?
I just saw Councillor Morse with her hand up, so then I'll come back to you for the motion.
Both councillors, Getty and Fast, have been made some of the comments that I've been concerned about all along. And I'm still a little bit concerned. The principle of, I'm reading from the bylaw 603, which is the one that set up the reserve fund that we were required by the grant to set up. The principal objective of the Growing Communities Fund is to increase the local housing supply with investments in community infrastructure and amenities. So I think the argument is being made by staff that because there's 11 vacant lots that now have a no building permits will be issued on them, that by doing this interconnection to Bowen Bay, which is going to cost, how much is the interconnection to Bowen Bay section costing?
600.
I thought it's
under 700,000.
yeah, so that portion of the grant of the project is enabling those 11 lots to be built on. And therefore it meets the criteria of the general Growing Communities Fund. I'm not sure that 11 lots is enough to meet the criteria. I've been weighing all of that in my mind as well, so I just wanted to throw that in.
Over to the CAO.
In response to Councillor, or not fast, sorry, Morrison's comments. I did want to just be clear that right now there's a moratorium on any building in Blue Water Park that would result in any additional bedrooms, suites and the like, not just new builds altogether. And so the project that we see before us, both the Bowen Bay Connection Project and the Blue Water project in and of itself, both of those combined will increase capacity and security of delivery of water supply to the area such that we would be able to lift that moratorium. And so it's not just the Bowen Bay project that would support it, but it's the whole project of its entirety. And it's not just the 11 lots that has the potential to increase housing supply, but it's also the potential for secondary suites on all the properties in the entire neighborhood.
I misspoke, it's 6 lots that are empty, not 11.
So in staff's view, it's very much a project that can help address housing supply as well as first and foremost, security of water supply for existing residents.
Councillor Fast for a motion.
Thanks for that answer, by the way.
Speakers list was already closed. So if there's pieces that you'd like to speak to the motion, we can do that.
Here's my motion. That council direct staff to make up to $350,000 from the Growing Communities funds to this make available to this project to be repaid by the local service area users. I guess it could be specific there, should say. Daughter?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, please.
That the $350,000 portion of the Growing Communities Fund to be transferred to the Blue Water Park project be repaid by the local service area.
Sure, I wonder, do you have in there Growing Communities funds, so people?
Yeah, from the Growing Communities.
Okay, thank you, then that's my motion.
Okay, so Wayne, can we read out the motion?
That the $350,000 portion of the Growing Communities Reserve Fund to be transferred to the Blue Water Park project be repaid by the local service area.
Seconded by Councillor Getty. Discussion on the motion. So I am not in favor of this motion for a couple of reasons. Again, I come back to the point that this is grant money that's being loaned out. So what this motion does is it sets up grant money that's being loaned out to a local service area. And even though it's a local service area, it feels a little bit equivalent if we take the community center for as an example. So the community center is a project that had shortfalls to it that needed to be made up, and it was made up by grant money. It was made up by grant money that came out of, I believe, COVID Restart Grant, as well as the COVID. I think some COVID Restart money went to it, but as well as the Growing Communities Fund, significant portion of the Growing Communities Fund monies have been directed to it as well. And even though it was a cost overrun or not a cost overrun, but funds that needed to be made up, we're not asking property taxpayers to repay that. Second, if we get future grant funding coming from the province or coming from senior levels of government that don't have, that are wide in their applicability and can be applied to projects all over the island, what this sets the precedent for is an inability to use that money for projects in local service areas, whether it's Tunstall Bay, Hood Point, King Edward Bay, Eagle Cliff, wherever it is, or Snug Cove Sewer. Because what happens is if we get that grant money and we say, we want to take some of this money and invest it in the sewer, we will have Blue Water residents and West Side Water residents saying, hey, you made it clear that you don't want to take grant money and give it in an undirected way to a local service area. So as a result, we need to, fair is fair. I think that probably sets us up to being hamstrung in the future in the way that we use this money. That said, I think we also face a challenge, as Councillor Getty rightly pointed out, is that we haven't done the policy work yet to say, well, how are we going to apply this stuff? And I think this is part of the quagmire that we have with the local service areas on the island, is that you know, we do have some of these accounting principles, but at the end of the day, it's like the stuff has to get fixed and it has to get done. And the work in Blue Water and on the West Side systems in particular are getting done in a way that's stressing the ability of people to pay. So, you know, we're doing the first two phases of what was initially pegged as a 4-phase project here that's going to increase parcel taxes in that area by a ton of money per year for 30 years into the foreseeable future. And personally, and you know, well, personally and professionally, I think we get into a challenge if we're going to say that we can't take grant money that we receive from senior levels of government and apply it to infrastructure projects in the neighborhood. So that's why I would be against this motion. Councilor Morse.
So first of all, I'm feeling a bit alone here. I'm the only person in this on this council that is not part of the local service area. And I'm speaking for the other 40% of the island that isn't part of a local service area. So are you saying that anybody who isn't part of a local service area but needs some help with their infrastructure can have grant money? And I'm also having a little trouble, as I say, because how independent is everybody when they're already part of a local service area? So I think, and the community center was a community-wide project that anybody in the community can use. So I have absolutely no problem with the Growing Communities Fund being used for the community center. And 2 million of that project is for the community center. My other concern, I guess, is we haven't had the final costing for the community center. And hopefully it's not going to cost any more than what we have budgeted, but should we be, you know, using this money if we might need it for something else? So I think I'm in favor of asking for the monies to be repaid.
Councilor Getty.
I'm speaking in favor of the motion. I think that there's unfortunate that we're making this decision now without having a whole lot of background in terms of what some of the other spending priorities are that wouldn't be a local service area. That all of the bylaws are clear that the local service areas are responsible for their costs. And if this is a gift from the province, a grant, and it's supposed to be used for, at least the impression is that they're supposed to be used for not just infrastructure for a local service area, but community-wide projects or community building projects then, and I didn't hear, I wasn't aware earlier that it was linked to housing, but you know, I'm not sure that 6 lots is enough that to sway me for the 350,000 that we're putting into that project, but it seems to me that there's a difference, I suppose, in terms of how local service areas have been managed. And that what we've ended up in Blue Water Park is something that is very expensive with absolutely very little, very, very small reserves. And that's unfortunate. And, you know, that this, I have a hard time, I understand the not wanting to get into, lock ourselves into a corner in terms of not wanting grant money to be spent on infrastructure, but you know, that leaves out the element of the local service area. And I think that that's a distinction. There may be community-wide projects that we could be better spending this money on. And I don't have that background or that information to make those comparisons at this point. So because this is a local service area, you know, the local service area that I'm involved with is the one that has the water treatment plant. So, you know, if you want to put grant money into then that might be the best one as far as I'm concerned, but I still think that it's a distinction that is important and should be made, and that we need community-wide projects.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. Councilor Saunders.
Thank you. I'm kind of torn on this one myself. I'm looking at it as this grant money is intended to improve infrastructure. And we're focusing on this is or is not going to local service area. But if there were no local service areas and there was just the Bowen Island local service area, would we look at it, would we not look at it and say, there's some infrastructure that needs improvement? And then go ahead and do it. So I'm not sure that because there's an LSA involved, I don't know that for me, I'm not finding that that's all that relevant. But I am sympathetic to your comment about, but there's a whole lot of other places we could use this money too. So I'm a little torn on that. It's just that if it wasn't a local service area, it's still infrastructure. And it's still infrastructure that needs to be improved. There's not, I don't think there's any argument about that. It's really a question of pain. So I haven't decided yet how I'm going to vote on this, in fact.
Councilor White.
Just following up on Councillor Saunders' remarks. I think there is still a question of who's responsible given the differential in levels of reserve in different LECs. Or sorry, local service areas. And if over the years, the reserves haven't been built up in one area, but they have been built up in another area, then we be granting money to help that area. That didn't put enough into their reserve, even though I understand the unfairness of it in the sense that that was a lot of people who aren't the current owners right now. But so I'm torn as well. I don't know. Am I is that a reasonable comment?
I would offer that I think it is. I think our recent changes to the governance of those water systems speak to some of that. But ultimately, they're municipal systems. It's the municipality that sets budgets. Ultimately, it's been councils that approve those budgets. So I think it's, I think there's some historical challenges. And my view on community-wide projects is, again, like the boundaries are political. So if we use that money to take care of roads and culverts in a specific area, we're not going to fix all the roads and culverts on the island for $350,000. Right, it'll benefit a specific area. There's people that don't see themselves represented in the community center, but they're still paying for it. Folks don't have kids, but they still pay school taxes, right? So I think that's part of the challenge in developing policy is that notions of, what is exclusively a community benefit and what's exclusively an island-wide benefit are difficult. And I do appreciate the conversation because, this is, I think, one of those itchy, scratchy areas where strategy and planning meet the road of actual, what's it going to look like? Our council has taken a stand and said that infrastructure resilience and investment in infrastructure on the island is a key strategic priority. And now we're faced with a key project within that infrastructure portfolio. It's like, okay, well, how do we fund it? How do we use monies that we've received to it? And what do we want to do with our residents? What does that look like moving forward? So I agree that it's not an easy question, but I think this is probably like the first step of a conversation that we have, looking at priorities and how we fund them and how we want to direct that money and what that is.
Thanks. I'm just going to speak a little more to why I'm supporting this motion. It seems to me right now we still have local service areas. And they have contributions, and that's our bylaws that I think we should be upholding. the contributions that are in those funds are contributions that were made by the local service users, whether they're big contributions or small contributions or contributions that have been all used up on something else, or, you know, but they still are attached to that local service area. That is still a local service area that's in our bylaws. So until we get all harmonized and everything's all sorted out, and we are perhaps one day one big service area, I'm not sure that that would happen or whether that's a good idea. I think we should be fair to everybody who's in a local service area and use those funds for those projects, because although it may bring, I don't think you used the word hardship, but I can imagine that some residents might find hardship in the property taxes. I also think this is adding value to private property, and that people should pay that back. So that's just the cost of the infrastructure. I don't know what real estate lift might happen. And so I'm concerned about the last thing I'll say is I'm concerned about the precedent that it would set if we apply these community funds, and I'll call it, rather than government grant. I think right now they belong to the community, and therefore the community and for council to have this decision-making role. And I think awarding a grant to one local service area would be a precedent, I think, that other service areas would be looking at. And do we want to set up, this is what I meant earlier by the chill. I don't want to unsettle everybody with unfair treatment, with the sense that some people are getting something and other people are not. Even though some people may have been saving and contributing and over many years. So anyway, I'm sympathetic to the Blue Water users, and I imagine there's a lot of it that has to do with the original design and layout and how big was that spring in the beginning and all that kind of thing. But we're entering a period of climate change, and I think we need to act when we're already having drinking water concerns, and Vancouver Coastal Health has mentioned this, but I don't think we should be subsidizing it where, unless we're going to subsidize everybody. I think we need to be fair and uphold our bylaws, and the local service bylaw is one of them. Thank you.
So just a question to the CFO then, what would the repayment terms look like of a grant like this to a local service?
Council would be free to set their own terms. What's happening now in the sewer is an interest-free repayment period, and it is over 7 years. I could come back with some options for longer versus shorter interest-free repayment terms for council consideration if the choice was to go ahead and make that recommendation today.
Okay. So even if it is loaned out, then the bulk of that money isn't available for community-wide projects until that loan is repaid. Okay. Which then again gets me to the point of, should we be loaning out grant money? Local, essentially having the municipality be a bank for grant money that we have received. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Councilor Morris.
I may have missed something in the answer. Is the present loan of 3.1 being repaid by parcel tax?
It is, yeah.
And is there any reason why that parcel tax couldn't be increased to compensate this?
It could be, if that was the direction of council.
And that enables people to defer their taxes. Immediate cash out.
Counselor Jurgensen.
Chris C.
Is there any terms of the grant that would prevent us from loaning it out? I know a lot of grantors would frown upon
Looks like you're done talking.
such an action to loan out grant money. So is there anything in the terms of the grant that would actually prevent us from going down that route? I mean, I disagree with it as an option. Loaning out grant money just doesn't sit well with me. But for point of information, is there anything preventing that?
The CFO.
I would not repay the grant money. I would not recommend repaying the grant money to that fund. I would recommend reporting the expenditure as an eligible project expenditure. Getting rid of that money, and any money that was required to be repaid would be repaid and contributed into either accumulated surplus. Thereby, it takes the restrictions off of that money that you found an eligible project. So spend the money on the eligible project, and if it is repaid, put it back into an accumulated surplus, which is a fund is sitting there and has no rules around it. So if council decided that the community amenity that wanted to be funded down the road, maybe it wouldn't fit the criteria of the grant program, you would have that freedom to spend it in a way that you would. So there also is an expected kind of timeline on spending those grant funds. So my advice to council would be, if you do set it up as a repayable term, then the repayment should be made to some other reserve fund. And treat the expenditure as it's made as an eligible grant expenditure and report it that way.
Sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
So in that sense, the loan is, or the grant money is still enabling the project to move forward, which is the purpose of the grant. And so I'm not sure I understand whether it's a loan or it's a grant, a direct grant. It's based on what CFO has just said. It's going to go back. It's not going to be a grant anymore. So it is being granted.
There's a bit of a washing machine element that feels to it if you're taking grant money and loaning it out for a project that would be authorized under the grant and getting it repaid by the community and putting it into a fund that can be used for anything. Seems an interesting way to go. Okay, to the CFO.
There's the two things that I think about when it's a very difficult decision. One is that the project in Eagle Cliff is 73% grant funded. And I just feel a sense of unfairness about just because your house is in one neighborhood on one street, that all of a sudden your requirements to upgrade your system are only 23% of the cost, versus if your house is located on this street, that you're required to pay a much bigger percentage of it. I struggle with that sense of unfairness a little bit. When it did come to the decisions of the municipality to make choices in what projects were going to be applied for under that infrastructure grant program, we knew that we had only one shot at it. We couldn't submit two projects, and we went with a project that we felt had a higher chance of being approved. So in that sense, it's just luck of the draw where you ended up living that you would benefit from a grant. So it's just a sense of unfairness that I think is difficult to grapple with a little bit. And we're not setting a precedent at this point. It's been done before. The council has spent grant funds that are municipal grant funds in a local service area. It's the sewer. It's never been done in water. Water to date has only ever been funded by the residents of the local service areas in water. But certainly there has been significant amount of money, community money, that has gone to fund projects in the sewer. So I agree, we do need to get that policy work done. But it doesn't change the fact of prior council decisions and what has been made to date. So I just wanted to offer those two pieces that I still, it's a difficult decision.
Seeing no, Councillor Jurgensen.
I press C.
I mean, all this discussion really just begs the question of, are the local service areas truly an effective vehicle for water? Water something that we have a limited supply of on this island, and it's something we all definitely need. And I'm wondering if this needs to be a discussion we need to come back to, not for this particular motion, but rather in a more general sense, as to whether or not the LSAs are still an effective strategy, because that means that every time there's a crisis in one neighborhood, that neighborhood disproportionately has to deal with that, and some will get affected by more crises than others,
Looks like you're
versus
done
having
cooking,
it spread
so
out
you'll go and
across
you'll
the
hand it-
entire island. And I just want to offer my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Yep, to the CO.
I just want to, as a reminder, almost that a point that Councillor Morris had made earlier, that the LSAs represent the individual properties that are benefiting from the infrastructure that serves them. And so I would be cautious about dissolving the LSAs. There might be an opportunity at some point, hopefully not in the so distant future, where a merger of LSAs might be appropriate. But I would be cautious about, getting rid of the LSAs altogether, because there is about 48% of the population don't receive any water infrastructure benefits. And if, to me, it would be difficult for those property owners to be subsidizing all of the other property owners. So the LSAs serve a valid purpose, and so I'd just be cautious about
Merger is better, thank you.
Audio now on mute.
Merger was definitely the term I was looking for there, not having people who aren't on the water system paying for it. I don't think that would be fair either. I was merely thinking, rather than 7 LSAs, is that really an effective strategy versus 1 or 2 LSAs?
All right, thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Let's not open that conversation. So with that, I will, just for clarity, can we have the motion ready?
So it's that the $350,000 portion of the Growing Communities Reserve Fund to be transferred to the Blue Water Park project be repaid by the local service area.
And with that, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
You're now
Nay.
muted.
So motion carries with Councillor Saunders, Councillor Jurgensen, and Mayor Leonard opposed. And can we have someone move the recommendation, please? Councillor Getty?
Do you want it read out? Or we've sort of taken care of the center paragraph.
Just do the therefore.
Okay, whereas the lowest bid the Blue Water Park water main replacement and well upgrade project is approximately $400,000 over the estimated budget, and whereas council can make up $400,000 available from Blue Water Park reserves in the Growing Communities Grant Fund to address the budget shortfall. Therefore, be it resolved that council award tender 2314. 003401 for Blue Water Park well upgrades and water main replacement in Eagle Cliff Cove Bay connection to NB contracting for $5,528,625.01, excluding TSP.
Moved by Councillor Getty. Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Jumping back to the agenda here. Thank you, Councillor Morris. Request for property exchange 1461 Eagle Cliff. We have our manager of planning and development with us here today. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm here today for a property on Eagle Cliff Road, 1461 Eagle Cliff Road. So this property was developed sometime in the 1930s. This is a picture of Eagle Cliff Beach from the 1940s. So it's located below Eagle Cliff, above Eagle Cliff Beach. And this is sort of its approximate area. So as with several of the properties in this area, if you go looking closely in our online mapping, the property was built partly within and partly outside of the property boundaries, as I said, in the 1930s. In the early 2000s, the property owners began work repairing the renovation or repairing the foundation of the property. And through the building permit process, it was determined that approximately half the dwelling exists on the municipal road dedication at the top of Eagle Cliff Beach. This is a current picture of the house today. And then this was a survey done at the time that identified the area of encroachment of the house and associated other pieces, so steps, entryway, retaining wall. And at the time, what was eventually entered into was covenant BB 790147. And so it provided an encroachment area of about 450 square feet. It states the intention of the agreement is that the rights to the encroachment area are personal in nature and will survive only for so long as the lands are owned by the covenanter or their direct descendants. And says the municipality will agree to enter into a new encroachment agreement with such direct descendants. The covenant has clauses in it that requires the covenanter, so the property owner, is required to remove the works, the house and associated developments before selling the land or demolishing the existing building. So in essence, we as the municipality at that time agreed that the building could continue to encroach on its current location above Eagle Cliff Beach. But we were putting fairly strict, I think, for our other encroachment agreements, fairly strict requirements that, you know, it's for the use of the current owners, the use of the current family owners who have historically owned the property, but that if ownership changed, that we would expect the house to be moved off the road right of way. I met with the current owner about a month ago. When they raised this as an issue, and the letter that they sent is attached to your report. Essentially, as staff, then we looked at it. The owner's request would be to approach the idea of a land exchange, so exchanging land within the current encroachment area with other land on their property. So either at the top of where it joins Eagle Cliff Road itself, or even there's a road way that exists that comes down from Eagle Cliff down to Eagle Cliff Beach beside the property, just north of the property in essence. So the owner had proposed this idea of a land exchange. Staff trying to sort of generate, okay, what are options that are here? We thought about a land exchange. We thought, okay, if land exchange isn't desirable, there could be an option to just sell the land under the house to the property owner, so they could continue to have the house. An option would be to, instead of this covenant with this clause to be removed, we could instead look to amend it so it essentially enters into something similar to what our encroachment permit would be under our new policy. So that would be permitting continual use of the land in exchange for an annual payment based on the assessed value of the land. And there are a number of requirements in that new policy and bylaw for encroachments that we have. Option 4 would be no action, just continue with the current covenant. Or option 5, other alternative as identified by council. So the staff recommendation is that number 4, the no action, continue with the covenant. I think staff discussed and probably had different opinions on what a second choice would be. Probably some discussion. One of the things we did consider is like, is there use for the land exchange? So we looked at, okay, it would be useful to, you know, expand the road right of way along Eagle Cliff. Is there potential there for trail, bike lane, road widening, safer shoulder, anything like that. And I have some, I think, a picture in my report, but essentially the land is quite steep there. It drops off quite dramatically. And the same road right away width exists along a number of properties, so you wouldn't gain a whole lot by adding land at the top there of Eagle Cliff. And looked at, there is currently a rough trail that goes down that road right of way, essentially between Eagle Cliff and Eagle Cliff Beach. But there is a municipal trail that comes down roughly Cleator Road. And so park staff said that would be the priority, that we wouldn't look to, additional land on that road right of way to sort of improve that trail would not be a priority. The priority would be, and let me just try to.
Is the road right away that one between?
Yeah, so if you're following my mouse, like.
Line and then the white property line.
Yes, so this is municipal road right of way down
It's an
here.
unbuildable.
There's a rough trail that does scramble the way down, but as I said, sort of for municipal park staff, the priority would be improving this trail that comes down roughly Cleator. That's a much more accessible
I
route.
can see your
You
cursor.
can see my cursor, I know it's a little, but where this dotted line is here, thanks. Like this is the existing trail that comes here,
Oh,
it
there's
comes
your cursor.
down.
Okay, I see, thank you.
Yeah, there's a staircase by roughly Cleator Road that comes down that way. And so municipal parks staff would say they would rather focus on improving that access than having to down. So hence the staff recommendation is to take no further action on the proposed covenant amendment to stay with the terms in the 2009 covenant, but wanted to bring this to council's attention and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Councillor Morse.
I've been down there, but it was years ago and I don't remember walking around the property itself behind the house. Is it quite buildable behind the house? Like often when people buy old cottages, they demolish them and build a new one. So is there a good building site behind, or is that really it?
I mean, in essence, you would be building, slightly further back. I don't think there's a great other site. I mean, I can see from the files in sort of the 2005, 2006, municipal staff were sort of expressing that there would need to be a variance based on the setbacks from the sea to build elsewhere on the foot. In the past, we've supported variances like that, knowing that there must be somewhere on the property to build a house. And I think the logical site would be, I mean, essentially, from the property line over, like in this, right at the foot of Eagle Cliff, or up the property, sorry, but building sort of higher up Eagle Cliff Road, it's essentially a cliff that comes down. I don't see a building site. It would be in this bottom of the, if it's an L in that bottom of the property.
I mean, given lack of housing or whatever, and I'm reluctant to order somebody to demolish a house that somebody could live in. And I honestly can't remember how we ended up with a covenant that said that before they sold the property, they had to remove it. And I do remember the public works manager at the time being adamant that we needed that. We shouldn't give up any road allowance property, but nobody is going to be wanting more cars to be driving up and down Cleator Road and parking down there. And I don't know what else you would use that land for except for parking. So.
The CAO and then over to Councillor Bast.
I would just caution about the release of the public land, because it's hard to predict what we may want to use that land for in the future, especially when it's access to the sea, such as it is. It's hard to know what might be a viable solution in the next 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Councillor Bast.
Yeah, thank you. This is pretty clear to me, and having been, I agree with what our CAO has said about you don't know what the future needs are, except that I can say the future needs of Bowen Islanders are likely to continue to include beaches and access to beaches, including rough trails, because sometimes people don't want to walk along a busy or it's easier to send the kids down the trail than to walk along the road and then come down the regular trail. I mean, it's a charming Eagle Cliff cottage. I've lived in Eagle Cliff and I know about the property line issues and things. that was a long time ago, but still. However, future uses with more people living on Bowen, more people, even in the report talks about 61% of people who value and come to beaches more than once a week kind of thing. I think we should be doing as the Parks Plan said, which is securing more beach accesses. And beach accesses, to me, don't just mean some kind of trail that gets you to the intertidal. I think it means areas where you can sit and enjoy the view of the water and maybe have a picnic and things like this. We don't know what future uses will be, but beaches are not getting less busy on Bowen. And I agree with taking the long view. I like to think 100 years out. And I know when properties change hands, there's often changes to the building. Could it become even taller? I don't know. I guess that's a question for the planner. Is if the covenant was lifted, could the next owner build a taller, bigger building there?
I mean.
Okay, sorry.
No, I was gonna say through the chair, I guess it would depend, like, we have other covenants probably where we say, well, you can maintain it, you can't expand it. So I would imagine if we removed the clause, we said it could, remain, we could have clauses instead that say, you can maintain that this is the building envelope that can be maintained.
So we could put that in. All right. But anyway, I just think there's a few of these beach accesses on Eagle Cliff. This is the big public beach one of the only beaches, only biggish beaches on Bowen. It doesn't just come down to rocks. And I think it's very valuable for the community. And I like public land I think it should stay as public land. So I'm in favor of the recommendation that's here on the page, and I'd be happy to make it when the time comes.
Further comments or discussion? Councilor Wake?
Not sure I completely understand the utility of, so there is a trail currently going down adjacent to the house.
Yeah, let's just recap here. So this is Eagle Cliff Road up here. And there is a really rough trail that comes down this easement here, not for the faint of heart.
Right.
This is actually another road right of way, and you can actually drive down here, but again, not for the faint of heart, because it is a very steep drive, and it's mostly maintained by the local residents. And but otherwise, people will generally walk down this way, and there's the primary landing point right here, and then the Eagle Cliff float dock extends out here.
So is that Cleater Road?
Yes.
The trail's going down?
This is Cleater Road, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most people would access it that way.
Correct.
And Parks would rather improve or maintain that than build something through the right of way.
It's hard to know if this, like what the future might entail for this, but that would be much lower priority than improving and maintaining this. And then you can see the encroachment is this area.
Well, I guess I'm feeling like we're not, this is gonna make a pretty significant difference to the homeowner, given the requirement to remove upon sale, the sale value is gonna change. I'm not sure I understand the rationale of allowing it only for one owner when we don't really have plans to do anything. It's not really very practical to do anything beyond maybe improving Cleater Road.
Councilor Morse?
So I'm just reading through the covenant here. The covenant, they don't have to remove the works if the purchaser enters into an agreement satisfactory to the municipality. So the covenant could be taken over by the purchaser.
Yes, I think there's that clause in it as well, that they would need to enter into an agreement.
Looking at 7(1)(a) and then
Councillor Fest?
Two more reasons that I'm in favor of this recommendation. One of them is that for some people, homes rising up behind a public space like this make the public beach less appealing and hamper enjoyment. And this isn't just me, this is why most beaches don't have homes behind them. And I'm recalling a situation from back in the early 2000s when we did the first beach inventory on Bowen, being the Parks and Trails, or I guess it was Bowen Island Parks and Rec Commission at the time. And one of the other Eagle Cliff beaches that we were assessing and trying to help staff figure out which would be and council figure out which would be the best to put the trail down there, to which one got the development of a proper access. The presence of a house with many decks above this other beach access convinced the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee to recommend not putting any investment into that beach because they didn't think the public would enjoy it. There was this looming presence. And you know, some people are marvelous members of the community and they aren't going to have barking dogs and loud music and but we don't have anyway. I think for public land, we have a policy in place. If people want to do something on public land, another policy we have is the collaborative projects agreement, where groups can come and if they want to have a project for the community or part of the community on a piece of land, they can go through a collaborative projects agreement. For example, the West Side Playscape, I think, was one of those kinds of agreements, but it's for community benefit, public use on public land. And that's where my understanding of the policies of Bowen Island and of the parks plan, which speaks to beach use, stands. This is a private dwelling that's partly on public land. And so I think there should be consideration for the community now and the community in the future who want to use the beach. And there might be more people wanting to use the beach and to use the beach in different ways and to enjoy the outdoors in ways we've seen how people use the outdoors has changed in the past few years from COVID. And so I'd like to make the motion.
Sure. The only question I have prior to that is, so thank you for the report. Thank you for laying out all the potential options. I know that there's several options here presented. And the recommendation here from staff is to take no further action. And when I read the words of previous staff in 2006 at the end of the report, says that it would require the sale of several hundred square feet of land, which is in part of the public access to waterfront. This is one of the few public accesses to the sea that provides access to a beach, especially in the Eagle Cliff area. You know, the municipality does not own many public accesses to beaches on the island, and this is a rare and valuable commodity. It's the planning department's position that the wider community would be better served by maintaining as much of the public access to the beach. Planning department is taking a very long view on the issue. Is the rationale for the current recommendation congruent with the planning staff's previous advice, or were there additions, or I'm just trying to understand the rationale for the current recommendation.
Yes, I mean, I think in essence, that's the same view that there's not many beaches, there's not much public accessible beaches on Bowen. We know that some of our beaches like Tunstall and Sandy exist as road ends, similar to this one. So people sometimes get hung up on the fact that it's like a road dedication that won't get built and say, well, no, that's used for the public, or it's public land, and that would be the potential for this beach down the river too. It's like increased sort of something on the land side of it at the
Thank you. Councilor Giddy.
Lincoln is down in there, in the area at some point, and when I look at this, aerial photograph, it appears that the lot that's just south of this lot has a building on it, but the next one appears to be empty. Is that by any chance, the donation to the province that the Nielsen's gave?
It's a fair bit further south.
Is that something that might be developed in the future? In terms of the other part of this lot being of interest?
I just want to clarify something for myself here. I think I heard the answer to this, but on sale of the property, the covenant could be passed. The new owner could apply for the same covenant.
A covenant that is amenable to the municipalities.
Right.
It may be that the municipality would want to make amendments to this current covenant.
Okay. Okay, but there are options other than tear the place down.
Fast over to you for the motion.
Okay. I moved that council direct staff to take no further action on the proposed covenant amendment at 1461 Eagle Cliff.
Okay, moved by Councillor Fast. I'll second. Any further discussion or debate?
I'm still not completely clear on this. We're saying this is not public access via Cleveland Road.
Yes.
It is 100%. That's the primary access.
So why are we saying we want to maintain public access here and we need this road allowance to?
Because we don't, currently, the access to the beach is, and that is the primary access to Eagle Cliff Beach. And, but when you get down to the landing area, it's fairly constrained and fairly tight. And by selling or transferring land or doing some sort of land exchange, basically prohibits or excludes the possibility of any future expansion of that public access point.
The trailhead.
The trailhead or the beachhead or whatever you want to call it. But currently, when you come down to the beach there, there's a bit of a landing zone for where the Eagle Cliff floats get anchored to shore. But otherwise, it's fairly constrained. And so if council were to decide to transfer the land or sell the land, then there's no opportunity for future expansion of that public landing area. It may be that in the future, like however far off into the future, the municipality may decide that, oh, we want to put pit toilets there, or we want to put some other access or something there, or some other public amenity to enhance the access point to Eagle Cliff Beach in a similar way that we've done at Tunstall or other beaches or other public access points.
So the existing house is in the way of that possible expansion of the land.
It's on the municipal land.
You can turn around down there now, but it's constrained and you can't really, there's no room to park there.
Yeah, you can turn around, but again, it's not for the faint of heart, and you pretty much need all-wheel drive. So.
Definitely need all-wheel drive.
Some of the things, thank you, that Parks, Trails, and Greenways have been asked by members of the public to look into and by organized groups on the island, including schools, is where could we have a beach volleyball court or something where we could throw a ball around near the water? Could we, well, the pit toilets is another example. Does that make it more usable by more and different kinds of people? Not just some people. Could there be, sometimes we're asked other things like, where are all the picnic tables? Is there anywhere to have a picnic? Well, it's a turnaround area. And in the winter, it's taken up with the floats that get pulled out of the water. So the public area above the intertidal, like at high tide, it's really constrained. And this house is on part of the public land. So it restricts public use. I don't think, we could put a kayak rack down there too, for example, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it doesn't take much investigation to see that in that neighborhood and throughout all of Bowen, there's many encroachments onto municipal land. And Eagle Cliff is notorious for that, and so we want to be careful about any precedent setting too, the decisions that we make.
Councilor Morris.
We have done land swaps and purchases. Any especially.
Yep.
Solve some of these historic problems.
Okay. My comments on the motion is I believe that the option presented from staff is probably more amenable to the property owner and future property owners than the other work that we've done on this term. We spent a lot of time looking at encroachment policies and bylaw and should the covenant be removed, and we looked at this property in the context of that, I think it would be a very significant cost to the property owner year over year. And the covenant effectively does the same thing at a much lower cost, if I'm not mistaken, seeing a nod from the planner. And so for that reason, that's why I'm in favor of this. And I believe that the potential future use and the future benefit to the community of maintaining an option on that land in the future has been satisfying for me.
And
Councilor Morris.
just to clarify, the way section 7 of the covenant's worded, they don't have to remove it before they sold the property. We could enter into an agreement with the purchaser that they would be able to continue to occupy the house. And if the purchaser wanted to redevelop, well, they'd be removing it, so. And having to site somewhere else, which is very clear in the covenant.
Yeah, prior to the completion of sale.
See no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.3, budget update as of June 30th, 2024. That have some in-depth comments on this. Just some brief comments.
Just a few brief comments. June 30th, the tax due date was July 2nd, and as you can see, we have collected 93% of our property taxes outstanding, so that is in line with previous couple of years. The property tax deferment program, unsurprisingly, is increasing in the number of applicants each year. I'm actually surprised that more people don't take advantage of it. Only 288 properties out of potentially about 2,300 are taking advantage of the program. Our revenue projections, I do believe that they will be very much in line with budget expectations by the time we get to the end of the year. There is some risk to potentially some of the recreation revenue, given the delays in the community center opening. There are some potentially other revenues that are going to be available to offset those shortfalls if they do indeed materialize. We have already surpassed our development permit, our building permit revenue for the year. Our budget was 270, and year to date, we're at 283. Mind you, significant amount was in part to a single approval of one very large property, which put us over the edge there, but we have met our target for the year, so everything that comes in from this point on is extra, so that's good news. As well, we will end up likely with additional investment revenue. I do tend to budget conservatively on investment revenue, but given the we're holding on to the funds longer, the delay in the project and the interest rates are tending to be persistently higher for a little bit longer. So in our case, where we have money in the bank, that tends to work in our favor. When it comes to our use of reserves, I tend to leave most of those entries till year end. Once we've made our capital expenditures, that's when I'm looking to figure out how those capital expenditures are funded. So I don't typically process any of those entries until further and closer to the year end. Overall, with our operating expenses, most of them are very much in line with what budget expectations are. There is going to absolutely be some additional costs. We're looking at perhaps about $78,000 of additional costs in the general government department. That is, of course, mostly factored or influenced by factors relating to this building and hanging on to this building a little bit longer than we had anticipated. Again, linking that to the project delays. There is, however, going to be some savings from our facility management line item, and I do expect them to pretty much offset each other. Some of the savings in some of the other operational line items. Recreation, I'm taking a conservative approach with the much of the programming that had to stop at the end of April. We lost that space at the Children's Center, and we're not able to carry on the amount of programming that we typically would in a year. I'm taking a conservative approach that the revenue is going to be reduced, but then the programming expenses, so the instructors and the space rentals associated with delivering those programs are also going to be lower. So I am expecting that there will be some savings in the recreation budget. Public Works, we did reallocate 0.5 of an FTE from the Public Works budget into the planning department. So you're seeing some savings there. Solid waste is showing some savings. However, the majority of that is going to be used in the capital fund. And we do have some purchase orders in, and we are anticipating acquiring some new garbage cans this year. So that is going to be used with that surplus from the garbage parcel tax. There's a significant underspend in the fire and emergency budget that's related to a single grant expenditure of about $150,000, which was a disaster risk mitigation program. We're still waiting on word of approval of that grant. And as well, some strategic planning. I expect that those expenditures that were in there, such as the OCP, engaging a consultant to do the OCP work, I do see more of that being pushed into the fall. So I do believe that more of that will be carried over into next year. So the expenditures in the strategic planning line item certainly are, we're just kicking the can down the road. We will be incurring them next year. Contributions to reserves, we have, for the most part, made all of them this year. There'll be a couple more that will come in later as some of our grant funds that we have yet to receive, our gas tax funds have yet to come in. We'll get those, we'll put them into the reserve fund as well. Our debt servicing is on track. We're probably going to end up paying off a little bit more principal than we had intended. We do have some variable rate loans, and with the interest rates coming down, starting to come down, it's potential another interest rate cut on Wednesday. So that will all be good news for us, and more of our payments end up going to repay the principal instead of all of it going to interest. So at the end of the year, at this point in the year, we are tracking towards a surplus of about $254,000, almost $255,000. It's about 2.9% of our operating budget, and that is not a surprising. It's very typical at this point in the year, and it is I think a positive thing. It does help to increase our overall accumulated surplus, which we would like to see incrementally continue to build that up. We started the year with 1.6 million in accumulated surplus, and we started the year last year with 1.3 million. So that is adding to our resiliency and our ability to withstand unexpected expenditures. So that's good news. Our capital expenditures are still we are quite under at this point in the year. Again, most of that is related to the community center expenditures. We spent just about half of the remaining budget, and we will be expecting to see that project wrap up by the end of August. So we'll all be excited to move into that new building. Yeah, so with that, I just wanted to produce this report to let council know that we seem to be on track. We have all of our anticipated revenues and expenditures to date are in line with where we should be for this point in the year. And I don't have any extraordinary financial events to report that you should be aware of.
Great, thank you for that presentation and that update. I'll look for any questions to the CFO. Seeing none, just a motion to receive. Moved by Councilor Getty, second by Councilor Morse. In favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 9.1, correspondence from Brad Hawthorne. So this
CAO update.
oh, sorry, yeah, highlighted that. Over to Liam for your last CAO update at a council meeting.
Where?
Well, I mean, aside from the other council that are going to.
Yeah, that's right. Last council meeting with the council that really matters.
Right.
That's why you're leaving.
But I did want to thank council for all of the great work that we've done together, that you have taken on some big challenges, and it has been a real pleasure working with all of you and getting to know you. And it's as I said earlier, it has not been an easy decision to make, to leave this island, and in particular to leave this place of work. The partners, there's far too many of them to list, and but they're also fantastic to work with too. So it's pretty it's been a pretty good run. And there's many projects as well that are hard to leave. And there's one in particular that was really hard to leave, and I hope for sure it is complete before I actually do leave. We're trying very hard to get that project done. And I think you all know what I'm talking about.
Swimming pool?
Yes, don't tell anybody about the swimming pool. But in particular too, I did want to take the opportunity in this public forum to express my deep appreciation and thanks to all of the staff here at the municipality. They have a phenomenal team, amazing to work with, very dedicated bunch. All of them show up ready to work and put in a tremendous amount of effort. It doesn't matter at what level they are or what stage they are in their career. It's a really remarkable team. I always say to them, we're a small team, but a very mighty team. And it's, they are making it very hard for me in these last few weeks to leave, because they're so great to work with. I'm greatly impressed with their professionalism and their ability to have fun too. So it's a pretty remarkable place to work. And I would be remiss to say that if I didn't mention that, I will also greatly miss my garden. So thank you to everybody and the community at large as well.
Thank you, Liam. Any questions for the CAO? Comments for the CAO?
We'll miss you. I'll miss you. Yes. I shouldn't speak for others, but I'll be, it's been great having you here, and all the best. And I hope we see you at UBCM and all the other places. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 9.1, which is the correspondence from Brad Hawthorne regarding the Snug Cove sewer system data. So we did have a chance to connect on this. I've had a chance to connect on this with staff, and then it was also discussed in the recent open meeting of the infrastructure task force. And staff has committed to forwarding Brad Hawthorne's data to Urban Systems. Urban Systems is going to provide a response to that data. It'll come back, staff will synthesize that data and provide a path forward. And the anticipated timeline for that return to council will be in the fall, so in September or October. So my recommendation at this point is there's no action that's needed to be taken on the correspondence except to receive it. And I would also anticipate that we would see Brad Hawthorne in front of council to present his presentations data as well in the fall. Councilor Morris.
Did I watched the infrastructure committee meeting and I wasn't clear that they actually had this correspondence. Because it had been sent, I think, the day before the meeting.
Yeah, so it was asked whether Mr. Hawthorne's additional letters would be forwarded to Urban Systems and
Well, no, to the members of the committee. I didn't think they had.
yes, we did.
Yeah.
Oh. I'll have a look at the revised agenda then.
Okay. Unless there's objection, let's do this by unanimous consent to receive the correspondence in 9.1. Moved, okay. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to reports of committees, committee of the whole and commissions. 10.1 is a staff report and recommendations of the Community Grants Advisory Committee meeting held July 9th, 2024. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. My many thanks to the Grants Committee, as well as to the successful applicants who are receiving grant money from the municipality this year. I believe that we were able to fund every application that we received, which was good news. So I look forward to seeing how those funds will be applied in the community. 10.2 draft minutes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting held July 15th, 2024. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please?
You moved the recommendation that was on the page, right?
Yes.
Yes, the agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Fest?
I move that council direct staff to write a letter of support for the Alzheimer's Society of Canada's application to the Public Health Agency of Canada, grant funding program Dementia, Community Investment Fund, working stream to be sent of the mayor's name.
Okay, moved by Councillor Fest, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. New business 11.1, update to Council on Metro Vancouver business. The Regional Parks Committee meeting held July 17th, 2024. Nothing explicitly related to Bowen Island. There were some interesting pieces on natural resource management, as well as some other updates that staff provided. I would encourage anyone interested to take a look at the recording and agenda of that meeting. Metro Vancouver has a board meeting this Friday, as well as a workshop that's coming up. It'll be Chair Hurley's first meeting as the chair. There'll be some pieces likely around the North Shore wastewater treatment plant that are coming up. Nothing specific to Bowen Island, as well as I'll be attending a community forum between Metro Vancouver elected staff, as well as the Tsleil-Waututh community on Wednesday, which will be, I think, a great opportunity to see how a community forum is being run. So I look forward to reporting back to council, as well as our OCP steering committee on that. But that's it for Metro Vancouver. TransLink. Yes.
I keep getting asked questions from everybody about where CRC is at. So did they kind of respond to the Islands Trust request, or do you know?
As far as I know, they are Metro Vancouver is in discussions with the Islands Trust. I know in my own discussions with staff that they have not responded to the response that was sent by our own planning department. And all of the other discussions about Cape Breton courtesy of in closed meetings.
Sorry, I got that wrong. I meant to say had Highlands Trust responded to the letter from Metro.
Not that I've seen on any of the agendas. Update to Council on Translink Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation meetings. We just did get an announcement from the federal government around the Permanent Transit Fund. I expect to hear some news about that.
2030.
Yeah. Coming up at Mayor's Council on the 25th, there will probably be much more saber rattling from my colleagues around that table for funding from the federal government. And we will also be seeing an election for a new vice chair of the Mayor's Council, owing to Vice Chair Hurley's departure from that seat because of his election to Metro Vancouver Chair. I'll hand it over to our Islands trustees for an update on Islands Trust business.
All right, there was a special meeting of the governance committee to try to draft a letter to the province with respect to 5 areas that we have concerns about that are specific. Can only be answered by the province. And there was some good discussion, and there was a subcommittee set up, and we had to be careful about quorum and not having formal meetings. So that we're supposed to have another special meeting in August at some point, but there's some difficulty getting that sorted out with too many meetings scheduled and finding time with everybody that's involved. And then there's a regular governance committee meeting in early September before the quarterly meetings of the Trust Council, and we hope to have something finalized to be able to get through to council to make a formal request to the province. This has been in the works for some years now, and this was our first major opportunity to focus on it. That was as a result of Adam Olson's presentation to us at the last quarterly meeting, and he highly recommended that we not let it go, and that we take advantage of the pre-election activity and see if we can get the current minister to pay attention, and if not, work on what we would like for a new minister, whatever happens after the election, to have as part of a mandate to help do some changes for the actual functioning of the trust.
Thank you.
I've been waiting.
Right. Okay, any questions for Islands trustees? No. All of our information items were received under the consent agenda. On the question period. So question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask follow-up questions relating to an item discussed at the meeting. Questions must relate to an item on the agenda and must be directed there. Limited to 2 questions per speaker and must not exceed 3 minutes total. Do we have any questions here today? Yes, feel free to come on up and join us here.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 questions, and this comes from the fact that councillors were voting on a situation where most people, except for Judith and perhaps Mary Ellen, have never been on property. So my question is, will we have a chance to bring this forward again for other options to be considered? And the second question is, will some of the councillors come and meet with us on site and staff so they can look at the situation to realize that nothing can be built on the property that you're referring to? And I feel it was a very awkward situation because so much is looked at on paper and not in the reality. And the biggest thing was that the idea that there was no access. There is public access. So my questions are, can we look at this again in terms of looking at the site and looking at other options?
Yes, so I can respond to that. So to the first question, will you have a chance to bring it forward? I don't believe that based on the process that we saw here today, that there's anything preventing yourself as a property owner in exploring the other options. The motion today was simply to take no action. So there are other pieces that I would direct your attention to were some of the alternatives that were contained in the staff report. I believe that from this chair, it was spoken to about the work that's been done on encroachment policy and encroachment bylaws within the municipality. So staff have just done an incredible amount of work on that. And it would be worthwhile to revisit those discussions, and staff can certainly point you in the direction of the council conversations on that and the staff rationale and the staff reports on how we're looking at working with encroachments moving forward. To the second question around can councillors come and visit the site? Absolutely, I would recommend reaching out to council members individually or as a group to provide them an invitation. It's not out of the ordinary that we receive invitations to go walk property and take a look at property, and for a wide variety of reasons. So I would absolutely encourage it. If there is an alternative course of action that you would like to take and you're working through that with the planning department, it's something that we can each count, I'll leave it, I don't want to speak for the rest of the councillors, but each councillor can take an exercise of their own discretion.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions today or folks that are online? Okay, I will look for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.